Welcome to the Navigating Disruption podcast. I'm your host, Shaquille Barmel. I'm the CEO of Ocean Blue Strategic and partner with the Summit Group. I'm a coach, consultant, and speaker, and I help leaders, entrepreneurs, and sales professionals make an impact through improved performance. In this podcast, I share insights and interviews with interesting leaders to define practical lessons that you can use to make an impact in the face of uncertainty. Since childhood, I have been deeply fascinated by the integration of two ideas. The first is how to understand the needs and expectations of others. And the second is how to organize engagement with others to exceed those expectations. Now, I embrace the fact that makes me sound like a geek. But let's call it being an aficionado for the sake of my guest. I discovered later in life that the integration of these two ideas has a name, and its name is Customer Experience Management, or CXM for short. This fascination with CXM has been one of the drivers of my education, volunteer, and career pursuits, which is why I am so excited to share this conversation with you. Riaz Raihan, a fellow CXM aficionado, is the president at Alita CXM. His company essentially enables organizations, both big and small, to move more easily from developing deep customer empathy to executing decisions and actions to transform customer experience, to increase their relevance to customers' changing lives, and create more value. Riaz and I have worked together 17 years ago when he supported my organization in defining a customer experience transformation. And I'm really thrilled to be able to reconnect with him in this conversation. Enjoy the conversation. Hello, Riaz. How are you today?
I'm well, Shaquille. How are you?
Oh, very well. Thank you very much for making the time. I've been really looking forward to this conversation. And the reason I've been looking forward to it is goes back to my childhood, actually. So you have been working in the field of customer experience at least as long as I've known you, which goes back to about 2003, 2004, maybe longer. But customer experience and the passion for it has been flowing through my blood since probably before I was even walking. And here's the story. My dad back in East Africa in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, ran a used car lot and a garage with his older brother. One day, a Canadian comes in Dar es Salaam and buys a vehicle from him, walks away, comes back about 6 months later, something's wrong with the car. He comes back for repairs. Turns out there's a issue with the fan belt or something. My dad repairs the vehicle. The customer comes back and says, how much do I owe you? My dad said, no, you don't owe me anything. You bought the vehicle here and I'm taking care of the repair. He goes, it's been 6 months. Things happened. My friend, it's fine. I'll pay for it. My dad said, no, you bought this car here and I want to make sure that you leave happy. The man gives him a business card, writes a note on it and says, if you ever are interested in coming to Canada, let me know. Canada needs more business people like you, which create an incredible customer experience. So long story short, things change politically in East Africa. And my dad and mom decide to leave Dar es Salaam to come to North America. And in the process of that, he ends up getting an official letter from this person who happened to be working for the High Commissioner to Canada. Sorry, the High Commissioner to Tanzania from Canada. And so that little story, which I grew up with hearing over and over from my mom, planted in me this recognition of the importance of customer experience. So I've been interested in the field. I studied at university, studied all about what it takes to create an incredible customer experience, to define what customers are looking for, and what you need to do in your organization to create the conditions to deliver that experience. So that's the background context by which I have been looking forward to this conversation. Riaz, you also came from another country. Tell me a little bit about your origin story.
Yeah, that was a great story, by the way. I truly enjoyed it. And it's true. It's also a closed loop, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is the premise of customer experience. My family originates from India, and we lived in different parts of the world. My dad was a naval officer and then became a diplomat. So we had the opportunity to be in Europe, to be in Africa, West Africa, not East Africa, and eventually the United States, and kind of found our way into Canada. And I can tell you, as I look back on my life, I can think of many customer experience stories as well,
Hmm.
which not as dramatic as the one you just shared, but still, important stories, important milestones that for me have truly shaped my interest in this field. And I'm fortunate now to be able to work in the software industry, which is able to bring science and automation to this very simple and yet very complex area of
Hmm.
customer experience management.
Hmm.
So happy to be here, Shakil, and to be chatting with you about this important topic.
That's wonderful. Great. Thank you. And if you have listened to any of my podcasts, you know I'm a big believer in the integration of nostalgia, present day, anticipating where the world is going into our conversations. And so lots of different directions that we could go here, but we'll see. It'll take a life of its own. Um, we first met, uh, I think it was 2004.
You're right.
I was working at Purelator. I was the director of sales effectiveness, but I was also responsible for initiative to improve our ability to retain and build loyalty with our customers.
That's
We
right.
were starting through a transformation initiative, which included technology. You worked for SAP at the time.
That is
And if
correct.
I remember it correctly, you were the vice president of value engineering.
That is right.
And while I was leading a work stream around improving customer experience using technology, CRM specifically, you were sitting with our senior leadership, the executives in the boardroom, mapping out the scenario of how much customer value could be created through a set of transformation initiatives, which included technology. So you've got a very unique perspective on helping companies go through that journey of transforming the value they create for their customers. What have you learned from those experiences moving from company to company, helping them with that journey? Are there some common threads that you've drawn from that experience?
First of all, your recollections are very accurate. It was 2003, 4, and yes, I was at SAP at the time, leading our value engineering practice.
Yeah.
As I went through that phase of my career, which now seems a long time ago,
Mm-hmm.
uh, there were three key themes, Shakil, that stood out. The first is when you start this journey, you have to ground it in facts,
Mm-hmm.
right? And facts are important. I mean, opinions are important too, but I think facts are more useful because they're defensible.
Mm-hmm.
And the facts that we used back in 2003-4 with Purolator were around the cost of delivering a package,
Mm-hmm.
customer feedback scores, the speed of doing this, and the efficiency of doing it. So
Mm-hmm.
we were grounding it in hard reality and comparing Purolator to its peers. At the time, I think it was FedEx, UPS, and companies like that.
Mm-hmm.
So starting with facts is important because it gives you a baseline against which you can measure success or lack of success.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a baseline that people can't argue with, right? A fact is a fact.
Yeah.
So that's number one. Number two, I found that orchestration is very important. When you get into the how of solving something, so the facts help you define the why, but when you get into the how of doing something, customer experience often requires orchestration across multiple stakeholders in a company.
Mm-hmm.
And I call it orchestration because that's what it is, right? It's like an orchestra where
Mm-hmm.
everyone has to play in unison, and that's what makes a beautiful melody or a beautiful music.
Mm-hmm.
Just having a great drummer or a great violinist or someone that's great on the piano doesn't make a great orchestra.
Yeah.
So all parts of the organization have to kind of play and have to play in a coordinated fashion, and that's what I call orchestration. So that's been a consistent theme across my career. The third one, interestingly, is about leadership.
Ah.
I found that leadership is difficult to define, but it's easy to experience.
Mm.
And leadership is a topic that's been researched ad nauseum. But if you look at leadership in the context of CX, I remember there were a handful of leaders at Purolator, and and I'm not talking about people necessarily who are in the boardroom. I'm not talking about levels. I'm
Hmm.
talking about leadership traits and leadership abilities.
Hmm.
And I think that's why you and I really struck it off, because you were one of those handful of leaders. There was another lady, I remember, who used to work closely with you, and there was
Hmm.
another person as well. So you guys were like prime movers in that company.
Hmm.
And the interesting thing is, nobody cared which department you work for. It wasn't about your department or about your mandate. It was
Hmm.
about Purolator's mandate, right?
Hmm.
So you need people that demonstrate this leadership, that the ability to say, it doesn't matter who gets credit for this. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter whose problem this is.
Hmm.
Unless we solve all the problems in the orchestration spectrum, the company is not going to achieve a greater outcome for its customers, right?
Yeah.
And that mindset for me is what I call CX leadership. CX
Excellent.
leadership is customer obsessed.
Yes.
It's not obsessed, it's not inward looking, it's not myopic, it's very outward looking and customer centric. So, and I think that's one of the reasons that you and I have stayed in contact,
Yeah.
almost 20 years since the day.
Yeah, yeah, really incredible. And we recently we had lunch together just before all this pandemic craziness began, and I'm very happy to have made contact with you again, and have that chance to have that meeting, because it's led us here to this conversation. I believe nothing is random in life. Things kind of happen at the right time for the right reason. Maybe it's our Eastern kind of influence in our lives. Um, One of the things that you've pointed to me to, thank you for that summary, by the way. So it's start with facts, because you can trust them, the hard reality. Orchestrating the entire organization and making sure all people are participating in the symphony. And three is make sure there are leaders in place. And so that is something you've observed, but I can imagine that's probably something, now that you know that, you can ensure that um, you can prescribe it.
Mm.
These are the three conditions from your experience that are required to create a really incredible customer experience CX transformation. Excellent. You introduced me to a podcast. This is CX, and one of the things that I really struck me as I listened to this is how CX is really, like you described, that orchestra. It's really about pulling the best from a number of various fields. There's art, there's science, there's technology, there's, my favorite, empathy.
Hmm.
And one of the things the host of CX talked about, and I heard it again recently from him, Paul Hayden, right?
Paul Hagen, that's right.
Yeah. He said that the biggest thing that's inspiring to him about the study of CX is the focus on empathy, on how to make people's lives better. And that really struck a chord with me. And I really do believe, as you said, that CX is really all about taking the focus off you yourself and being focused on giving to others. Isn't that the ultimate formula for mankind? Focus on the other and not on yourself. And
Absolutely.
so with that spirit, I'm seeing you smiling. So you also recognize the fact that CX is actually a much bigger cause than improving revenue or increasing customer loyalty. CX is really about improving the quality of life for people in this world.
It really is. And if you look at how the world has changed, right? If you can
Mhm.
get a little tactical
Yeah.
for a bit, if you look at how the world has changed, let's observe a couple of trends that have all happened over the past 5 to 8 years, right? The first trend is the change of the economic model. So almost every business today is a subscription business.
Mm.
It used to be a trendy thing in the software industry, and I think the music industry then caught on to it. And you had people, companies like Apple and Spotify and Amazon Music, and you had Netflix. And slowly but surely, a lot of businesses have become subscription businesses.
Mm.
You have companies that send you fruit every month till you tell them to stop. There's companies that send you clothing choices every month, and they curate clothing for you based on your likes and dislikes until you stop them. There's companies that provide all kinds of things which are subscription based.
Mm.
This is an important shift, Shaquille, because the old model of buying an asset and then making a big decision, a big capital outlay, and then either benefiting or suffering that decision for many years, that model is slowly dying.
Hmm.
We're moving to a model where people buy what they need when they need it. And of course, therefore, they have the choice to stop the subscription when they don't need it.
Right.
This is huge because the power is shifting from the supplier to the consumer. The consumer can now say, I've had enough, I don't want it anymore. Uber is a classic example of that. You want transportation, you don't need to own a car. So that is one big shift. The other big shift, the other big vector, which has enabled this and enabled people to speak up, is the advent of ubiquitous and inexpensive mobile technology.
Yeah.
Being ubiquitous is not enough. Being inexpensive is not enough. You have to be both.
Yeah.
And mobile technology today is ubiquitous and inexpensive. It's actually a great equalizer. Some of the biggest users of mobile technology in the world are not necessarily the Western world or the developed world, right, in terms of numbers. So, of course, the West still leads on many vectors, but just the usage is universal. So mobile technology, and then, of course, the third vector is social. Social media has allowed people to voice their opinion like never before.
Yeah.
People can now create content. We are doing it right now.
Yeah.
And use social media and other means to spread that content. So people have a voice, they can voice opinion. So if you think about these three vectors colliding, the change in economic models towards subscription, mobile technology being ubiquitous and inexpensive, and of course, social media becoming a part of normal life. 10 years ago, it was a novelty. Today, everyone does it. And most people are on multiple social media platforms. If you put those three things together, it's the perfect storm for the CXM revolution. So not just customer experience, but customer experience management.
Right.
And this has opened a massive opportunity for vendors like, a variety of vendors, including the company I work for, Alida, where we have the opportunity now to benefit from these three vectors and to create technology that allows companies to manage customer experiences, which they can learn about through social media and through mobile technology.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's important for them to do. It's no longer a nice to have. It's a must have.
Yeah.
Like that gentleman was surprised at your dad's generosity. It was an aha moment for him. But today you have to treat a lot of customers that way. Otherwise, they might stop their subscription.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's a must have.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's created this entire industry of CXM. And I think it will only get bigger and better over time.
Well, let us get tactical then a little bit. And you've led us to a really good place to have this conversation, because I started with this conversation about, motherhood and apple pie and empathy. But the reality of it is that people like us, yourself, your colleagues have to take that good feeling and turn it into something real that drives better actions in businesses. So can you connect the dots with me between this desire for greater empathy and focus on the other and what you do at Alida?
Sure. And empathy is, I think, fundamental. I genuinely believe people who work in CX or at CX companies that make software have to have that as a core value. Empathy and authenticity, I believe, is very important, right? You have to genuinely care about other people's experiences. Because if you don't have that genuine care, you can never walk a mile in their shoes.
Absolutely.
And if you can't do that, you can't create great software or great tools or great processes that solve for that, right?
Yeah.
So I think empathy is critical. It's crucial. It's actually one of our core values at Alida. And we have 4 core values, be bold. So we want to be bold. We want to be empathetic. We want to be curious, and we want to be authentic. So if you look at empathy and authenticity, they're actually quite, connected. And I think that's very important. Now, how do we translate that into great software? Let me give you a couple of pillars that connects the dots on this. Number one, we have to meet people where they are. The old paradigm was, if I wanted your feedback, Shakil, I would send you an email, and I would expect you to take time out of your day to respond to my email. And by the way, it would be a long, tedious survey, so you better get a cup of coffee, and you better be ready for a big investment of time. And then, of course, when you give me all that feedback, you might never hear back from me. Right? Now, that's a very unempathetic way of taking your feedback. I've said there's only one way to give me the feedback. It's email. It's tedious, so please make the investment for no obvious return. And number 3, once you do it, thanks.
Yeah.
It's a hit and run, right?
Yeah.
So I've taken your feedback and then it goes into a black hole and you never understand it.
Yeah.
Now we've attacked that from an empathetic angle. So number one, you meet people where they are. So in other words, a lot of folks today are not big email users, right?
Right.
Especially if you look at millennials and Gen Ys and Gen Zs, they prefer social media, they prefer messaging apps, they prefer that kind of experience. And messaging apps are big. So we first of all meet people where they are. That's important. Your technology has to be smart enough to go to where people are, as expecting them to come to just email, because that's the way you want to do it. So that's number one. Number two, the engagement has to be interesting.
Yeah.
It cannot be a census like survey as long as my arm that you have to go through, and it doesn't allow you to go to the next question unless you answer this question and it
Yeah.
says fill the box. It cannot be that was okay 15
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah.
Today it's considered draconian. So the survey or the feedback capturing mechanism has to be engaging. It has to have many paths. If I'm talking to you about coffee and you say you like lattes versus someone else who says they like cappuccinos, it has to have different paths of questioning. So all of that logic and intelligence and engagement, the
Yeah.
onus is not on the consumer. The
Right.
onus is on the creator. We have to make sure that we are empathetic and make it engaging for you. So you're almost having fun while you're giving this feedback, right?
Yeah.
There has to be an element of fun and gamification. Like, why do people go to social media? Is there an incentive? Like, is anybody handing out checks? No.
Yeah.
People go there because there's an inherent incentive in engaging. It's
Yeah.
engaging, right?
Yeah.
So we have to be engaging as well as we gather that information.
Right.
And of course, number three, you have to know the results of your effort. Like, even if you invested a few seconds or a few minutes giving feedback, you have to know, where did that go? So one of the things we do, which is a best practice, is that once you respond to a question or an interesting question, which of these coffee drinks do you like? Lattes, cappuccinos, Americanos, or just black? It'll give you an immediate share back, and it'll say all the other respondents have responded this way, and you get to see in real time.
Awesome.
And there's something nice about it. It gives you a little dopamine hit. You feel good about the fact that, I'm one of the few, or I'm with the crowd, or whatever. It gives you perspective. We call it a share back in the industry.
Yeah.
And then of course, there's more to it than just a share back. Your feedback goes back, and oftentimes there's engagement. The software is intelligent. It interacts with you. You might have a human being call you, etc. So I think these are the ways in which we are taking empathy and making it real, right? We're going from motherhood and apple pie to actual design thinking, which embeds empathy in a way in the software. And the AI is incredible these days. It really allows you to do some great things.
Yeah. Okay. So really great explanation. And so I'm going to reframe it a little bit, because what I'm hearing is that you have taken the principle of empathy and authenticity to integrate it into the way you enable your clients to gather insights, data about what their customers and prospective customers are going through, so that the experience of sharing the data feels more authentic and engaging and rewarding to the individual providing data.
Mm-hmm.
But the ultimate end goal of that is so that the business, the organization that's gathering that intelligence, that insight, is then able to change the way they create the experience for the customer in whatever it is they're buying, whatever service, whatever product they're buying, to be more aligned with the way they want to consume and engage and live. Correct. So that's the whole purpose of it all, right? Is to create better experiences in the long run, not just in the gathering of the data, but in the living of life and in consuming of services. What problem was Alita trying to solve when it started building its platform?
So, I really appreciate you contextualizing this, and it's true. That's exactly what it is. It's not just about making the data collection engaging. It's also what do you do with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what we are solving are two very important problems. And we are a 20-year-old company. So we had our roots in market research and customer research. And that was great because it taught us how to listen. It taught us how to ask the right questions. Mm-hmm. It taught us how to truly suss out the truth and not just superficial opinions, etc. And now, as we enter the CX age, this golden age of CX, as I call it, there's two key problems that we are focused on solving. Mm-hmm. And I'd argue that that based on the recent Gartner report, where they ranked us, in the top 10 vendors across 400,
Wow.
It's a good validation that,
Congratulations. Yeah.
well, thank you. It's a good validation that I think we're on the right path, but there's lots more to do. So what are those problems? Number one is what we call the outer loop, and number two is what we call the inner loop. So let me explain. I'll start with the inner loop. The inner loop, we talk about customer experience being a closed loop system. In other
Yeah.
words, you listen, you interpret, you act, and you monitor, and you make sure that you're acting, appropriately. So when we talk about the inner loop, it's about understanding the voice of the customer
Yeah.
and bringing that voice to the right person in the organization automatically and swiftly so that they can take action.
Mm.
This sounds simple, but it's actually very complex once you understand that most of our customers are, Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 global corporations with literally tens of thousands of employees,
Right.
and they have millions of customers.
Right.
So the scale is staggering. You're now looking at monitoring experiences of millions of customers that are coming and interacting with your company through a multitude of channels. It could be direct, it could be indirect, it could be through a reseller, it could be through a retailer, it could be through a service provider. Millions of experiences happening in real time, and most of them are going fine or going great. Some of them are not. Capturing that information quickly and bringing it to the right person or persons in your company so that they can take action and set it right so that that customer remains a happy customer and doesn't think of leaving. That is the inner loop.
Yeah.
And the inner loop is all about individual customer experiences. So let me
Mm-hmm.
give you an example. Let's say Shakil Bharmal before the pandemic would fly for business, and he was, let's say Shakil is a elite flyer in Air Canada. And if Shakil likes aisle seats and he actually gets a window seat or he gets a middle seat, even worse, well, Shakil is not a happy camper. And first of all, the trick is to understand that this happened. And
Yeah.
by the way, you don't have to ask Shakil this.
Yeah.
That's direct feedback. There's indirect feedback. You have the reservation system. You know his preference. You know he got a middle seat. The AI should be smart enough to match this and say, "Oops,
Yeah.
we screwed up," right?
Yeah.
Before
Absolutely.
and Shakil is already mad because
Right.
he's going into the aircraft and he sees, oh no, it's a middle seat
Yeah.
and it's a long flight and he's an elite customer. So the AI has to be smart enough to say, hey, even before he lands in his destination, let's send him a quick text, a personalized text. Dear Shakil, we know you like aisle seats and we know you got a middle seat today. We apologize for this inconvenience. And as an act of gratitude for your business, we give you this coupon for a free ticket or maybe a free upgrade or maybe, $20 to spend at the airport we just landed. A small gesture like that, Shakil might never use it. It doesn't matter. But he knows, he's like, wow, they figured this out. And suddenly you go from someone who's a little irate after a long flight in the middle seat, and who spends a lot of money with the airline, by the way, who walks out, sees this message, and he smiles. And that's a moment of magic, right? Because
Absolutely.
now instead of potentially losing him, not necessarily losing him for good, but he has so many options to buy from. You now have him as a loyal customer. It's like that Canadian gentleman who bought a car from your father, who would always buy from your father because
Yeah.
it's that moment of magic, right? And
Absolutely.
it's a little thing, but it matters a lot. And suddenly Shakil feels that this company really cares about me. So that's the inner loop.
Yeah.
Inner loop is super important. It happens every day
By the
in the
way, you
office.
must have been following me around traveling. The number of times that's happened, and the number, and you're absolutely right. Had they recovered with something like that, it would have changed the game.
Totally, and made you even more loyal, right?
Yes, absolutely.
And these are the little things that software and AI can allow us to do at scale. You can't have
Mhm.
human beings sitting and monitoring this. It's
Mhm.
impossible, right? There's too many interactions. There's millions and millions upon millions of these things. So software has to solve for this. The human touch can happen. I remember one time I was flying in airlines that should remain nameless, and they lost my bag. And I had status with the airlines, and they had a human being call me to explain to me and apologize and keep me in the loop as they tracked my bag down. And eventually they did not find my bag, but they compensated me for it. But the point is, I still fly that airline, regularly.
Yeah.
Now let's talk about the outer loop.
Mhm.
The outer loop is about trends and aggregations.
Mhm.
So the outer loop is not about an individual, it's about clusters of data. So if you can visualize in your mind every customer interaction, giving us data, data about it going well, it going badly, it going average. And this data kind of clusters over time.
Yeah.
Understanding those clusters is super important.
Yeah.
For whom? It's super important for product designers. It's super important for service designers. It's super important for experience managers.
Hmm.
So that data becomes gold in the hands of people inside the company that can look at that and say, oh, we see the trend. This new product we launched, there's many things that customers like about it, but there's a few they don't.
Mm.
And it's not based on opinions, it's based on actual factual experience data. And we can take that and we can kind of sand out the little edges and make our offering a little bit better.
Yeah.
Often, this is a game of inches.
Yeah.
We're not talking about seismic changes. Sometimes we are, but most of the time, this is a game of inches, right?
Yeah.
And this is how great shoe companies or great, service companies or great handbag companies or car companies or media companies, all these amazing customer-focused companies, they want to see where the trends are, so they can take the sandpaper and slightly sand off what needs to be sanded off and maybe add a feature. And these are subtleties. Great companies use the outer loop magnificently. They really understand the power of aggregations, the power of real-time data, and they also understand the importance of living in the present and the future, not in the
Yeah.
past.
Yeah.
Just because something was in vogue a long time ago,
Yeah.
it doesn't mean it has any relevance today. I'll give you
Yeah.
a classic example. Fountain pens. They were all the rage
Yeah.
150 years ago. You don't see them a lot today, right? So just because you can design a better fountain pen doesn't mean anything. You got to have one of these.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of evolution that the outer loop allows you to do.
Yeah. Oh, so that so many places to go from there. Yeah. So one of the things that also makes me think of is this idea of this outer loop is that if you're always looking for those fine edges, I also call it the slight edge technique, and you can compare it in professional sports as well, right? The difference in score between the number one golfer in the Masters or in the PGA and the 150th golfer is probably 2.5, 3 strokes on
That's
average,
it.
right? That's it.
That's it.
So in the process of, like you call it, sanding out the rough edges and introducing things, you know, there's a big conversation to be had about how organizations test and learn, right? Because you can't wait for a whole year cycle or taking something to market to figure out whether that edge you sanded out is the right one or this edge is the better one. You have to be able to have probably thousands of variations there to decide which is the move we're going to take to everybody.
Mhm.
And does the work you do, the work that Alita does, also play a role in that?
It does, and this is an important use case for us. We call it the inside community. So in
Hmm.
addition to going out to all customers and tracking all experiences and getting feedback from everyone, oftentimes companies will parse out or recruit a
Yeah.
subset of
Yeah.
their consumers or customers, and they'll call it a community. You can call it by different names, right? But it's essentially a community of people who care.
Yeah.
People who care about your company a little bit more than all your customers. So you recruit them, and there's ways to identify who these people are. Often it's repeat customers or customers that have been active in review forums,
Yeah.
giving them an opportunity to accept an invitation from you and join. Here's the interesting thing, Shakil. Many times, I would say most times, people who get recruited into this inside community, they do it just for the love of doing it.
Hmm.
And that's the best kind of feedback. When
Hmm.
people do it because they love your brand or they love your product, I'll use the
Hmm.
example of Audi, who's one of our greatest clients. Audi has obviously millions of Audi
Hmm.
users and fanatics around the world, and they make great products. But they also have this concept of the community, the Audi Club, in which you get invited, and then you can give Audi feedback on the new products Audi's bringing out, or the new SUVs, or maybe the shape of the bumper. It could be something as trivial as the shape of the turn signal light, or it could be something as fundamental as, hey, what are we missing in our lineup, right? And you're absolutely right, right? That community and their voice is gold. To
Hmm.
be able to do this with technology gives you many advantages. The first advantage, of course, is the community is global. It's virtual, so people just log in and they have their own access. The second advantage is that you can run all kinds of activities with them. You can run design activities, you can run update activities, you can run regular surveys, all kinds of things are possible. You can use visuals. And the best part is that the community tends to be extremely engaged, as I said earlier, for no reason.
Yeah.
except that they want to be engaged, right?
Yeah.
So yes, well, we see that as a very important offering that we bring to the market.
I like teaching and learning through the Socratic method. So I didn't start this conversation asking you to clearly describe what Alita does, but let me summarize this way and see if I've got it right and you can react. Basically, Alita provides a set of tools. It's an integrated platform that allows companies to gather insight from the various activities that their customers do in the marketplace, whether it be through live purchasing, online purchasing, social media engagement, surveys, to gather that information, integrate that information to create insight. And then from that insight, it positions companies to be able to then take action to improve overall customer experiences in two ways: inside loop, outside loop. Improve experiences by solving problems in the immediate time, but then at the same time creating insight to draw opportunities for improvement and enhancements in a much bigger macro way to take the entire market. Did I get that right?
Beautiful description. Couldn't have said it better myself.
That's amazing. You know, what it makes me think of is, I read an article years ago when I was in management consulting, and I can't even remember the author, but it was all about how to not confuse customer service ratings of very good or very good experiences with those that are like excellent, right? Don't confuse the fours with the fives, because the fives, probably five pluses, are your evangelists.
Mm-hmm.
They will likely stay with you no matter what, like the people you described that love your product. Some people are lulled into this belief that says, hey, fours, 4.5s, those are pretty good. If people rate you 4.5, hey, we should be pretty proud. Actually, those 4.5s will leave you in a second if a better opportunity comes along.
This is true.
Now, the reason why this is important, because I think about it in my own life, and I won't name companies' names because that's not fair, because there are probably a lot of similarities. In my purchasing of wireless telephone services, probably for my entire professional life, I have always dreaded the need to get in touch with my provider, whether it be for a billing error or looking at upgrading my phone or investigating a better rate plan. My wife would ask me to do it, and I would procrastinate for weeks. My dad delegates the job to me when he has a problem because he says I'm more patient. But if there's anything that tests my patience, it's that experience of engaging with the company. And it doesn't matter. Like it could be any one of them.
Yeah.
So as I think about those experiences, as most recent as a couple of weeks ago, you can engage on chat now, which at first was really good, but even that's got its complexities now. You're now waiting on the chat. You can call them, but then it depends on whether you have a personal phone or a business phone. And sometimes you get routed to the wrong place, and then you get on hold. And for each person you talk to, you have to go through your whole story again.
Yeah.
But if somebody were to look at my account, they would say, wow, what an incredible customer. He must be so happy. He's been with us for 8 years. He spent thousands of dollars with us, and he's so loyal. In fact, he's got a second phone here, and he picked that up about 5 years ago. But that hides the truth that I find a big part of my interaction very frustrating.
It's true.
How do companies crack that problem?
So I love how you described it, by the way. It's fascinating. And it's a good example. In Canada, I think it's really a choice of one amongst three. And now there's a few other players as well. So the lack of competition leaves no incentive for these firms to really invest big time. But if I look at a very competitive market like Asia, or I look at the United States, where there's a lot of competition, lots of choices. And when I say Asia, I'm talking about large countries like India, right, or Japan, where there's lots and lots of providers, lots of competition. I can share with you the way to crack the code on that. First of all, is to understand what we call CLV, customer lifetime value.
Yeah.
So as you said, you've been a loyal customer for 8 years. That's a lot of value.
Yeah.
You can't treat the guy who's been loyal for 8 years same as a guy who's just switched for a couple of months because they
Right.
took advantage of a promotion, and
Right.
treat them the same. But companies will.
They will.
Even worse, they'll treat that guy better than they treat you,
Exactly right.
because the only for new customers offers often are better than the ones for existing, right? So
Exactly.
this is a known issue. So part of it, goes back to the start of our conversation. Part of it is about leadership. You need leaders within these companies who actually are willing to work and orchestrate across different departments using the facts, right? Facts, orchestration, leadership. But you start with leaders.
Yeah.
The leaders are the ones who go look for the facts, and then they orchestrate the activities to say, hey, this is not the way to live. We have to do better. But in this particular case, the software would look at CLV, customer lifetime value.
Yeah.
It would it would give you the ability to create offers based on CLV, as opposed to offers for just new subscribers. And
Right.
once you take a customer lifetime value lens on your customer base, and let's say you remap all your customers, they're not just names with numbers on a list, a customer master. You almost think of a bubble chart where the most loyal customers are the biggest bubble, and the least loyal are the tiniest bubble. Obviously, you can't treat the two bubbles the same, right?
Yeah.
But the first step in that is to do a customer lifetime value analysis, and not just do the analysis, but to keep that analysis alive constantly and
Yeah.
make decisions based on the value that customer has brought to you.
Yeah.
So that's how we would solve it. But as I said, the macroeconomic trend is, when there is competition for customers, for consumers, there is innovation and there's investment.
Yeah.
The lack of competition takes away the incentive to
Right.
be innovative, right? So that's a macroeconomic issue. But
Right.
assuming we solve for that, this is how you would solve this problem.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. And I believe that one day we will, or somebody will come along and the right leader might enter the scenario and do that. Um, I could keep on going on this topic with you, Riaz. There's a few other things I want to cover. There's a big focus on futurism, right? And has been for a few years, about the ability to see where things are going and to map out various possible scenarios and come up with the contingency plans for each scenario. There's many reports out there. The consulting firms all write them. I read one particular one from RBC, and it was called The 8 Ways COVID is Going to Change the Economy. And it talks about potential changes in the way people live by traveling, the way they get educated, the way they do business, the way they shop, the way they get healthcare, the way they share, the way they get entertained. And we're already seeing this, right, happening.
Mm-hmm.
So as these changes kind of expand into the way we live and work, there will be companies, some which will be good at seeing these shifts and pivoting to be better service providers to customers and have new products and services. And there'll be those that will struggle and won't be looking forward and seeing that. What do you think is the biggest difference between those two types of companies?
I think the single biggest difference is leadership. The facts are available. If only you're willing to notice them, they're available, right? The facts are always out there. So, but it's leadership that allows or the driver to say, hey, we have to actually look at the facts and change accordingly. I work with companies around the world in all continents except Antarctica, and I see a clear trend that companies with great leadership are trying to stay ahead of the curve, and companies with average leadership constantly struggle with this because they're not looking ahead. One of the examples I can give you is a large publication house in the UK. They have 15 million loyal subscribers, and they have a global audience of 360 million people. Now, some estimates say that number is understated. It's probably more like 500 million, so 500 million people. We're talking massive numbers. And one of the lines of business this company has is travel. Travel doesn't exist, right? So a company with poor leadership might say, hey, the travel business is dead. Let's cut our losses and move on. Not this company. They're like, hey, the travel business has paused. There's a lot of pent-up demand. It's going to spring back with a vengeance when the world is allowed to travel again in 2021 or beyond. No one really knows when, but whenever it happens, it's going to be huge. So let's get ready for that now and plant the seeds using our publications and reaching those 15 million or 300 million viewers, subscribers with great travel content, because they are so ready to travel. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Same facts, two
Yeah.
very different
Yeah.
approaches, right? And I work
Yeah.
with both types of companies that are the first type, which are like the sky is falling, and companies that are, this is a great opportunity. Let's get ready for a fantastic travel future. I tend to believe that the latter will do better post
Yeah.
pandemic,
Yeah.
because they have understood that the world has changed in many
Yeah.
ways, but in some ways nothing has changed.
Yeah.
People still want to have a good life.
Yeah.
They still want to see their friends and family. They still want to see exotic places. They
Yes.
still want to travel. They still want to experience the world. So
Yes.
why not get ready for that? That's an example, but I see this playing out in
That's a great
industry after
example.
industry.
If I can extrapolate also then and say in that example of those companies that'll do well, let me subsegment them even further and say within that group, there will be companies that do even better
Mhm.
than the other ones that'll do well. And I think, this is my prediction, that those companies are the ones that actually are reading customer signals
Mhm.
because behaviors are changing, right? And so, yes, people will want to get back to travel and they may want to get back to travel with a vengeance. But the way they live their lives on a daily basis, the way they consume information, the way they do research, the choices they make, the things they care about now have shifted.
Mhm.
In some cases, in small micro ways, like the sandpaper analogy you described, in some ways, in big ways. Cleanliness, safety, hygiene are all
Absolutely.
going to be things.
Absolutely.
So within that group of companies that will do well, I think the ones that will do even better are those that do a great job of collecting micro signals and macro patterns to shift and change the way they do business, even though the core product or service might be the same, to revolutionize the experience based on those shifts and changes in behaviors. What do you
You're
think?
absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And your point about the micro signals and the micro trends is a very
Yeah,
good one. It's a good way to
yeah,
describe it, right?
yeah,
Because the signals are trickling in constantly, and you have to keep listening. But then you have to apply intelligence to understand what are the signals telling me as a pattern.
yeah,
And there's always patterns. Like nature is full of patterns. Customer
yeah.
behavior, consumer behavior. We are all creatures of habits. Our habits shift, but smart companies realize how those habits and behaviors have shifted, and therefore get ready for the new future in the new shift.
Absolutely. Simple example I can think of is Airbnb may
Mm.
have a second rating, which is the cleanliness rating,
Hmm.
right? That might be another thing that could come up. Uh, since we ended the topic on leadership and strong leadership, I have gotten through my sources, Riaz, that as your company has grown, you have had some people that were with your predecessor brand, Vision Critical, left and then have come back, and you're rebranded as Alita now. And some of those people are saying it's a very different culture. Can you tell me a little bit about what you think is the shift has been in that culture that these people are saying, wow, what a different place?
Uh, it's actually been quite humbling to see these folks come back and look at our company and almost remark in fascination that it's nothing like what we left, right? It was a great company then, it's an even greater company now, and in many different ways, and we've evolved and so on.
Mhm.
And in some ways, the analogy I would use is like you going back to East Africa or me going back to India decades later and remarking that this is a very different place than what we left, right?
Mm.
And I think a lot of folks across Canada would have that experience. We are a great country, full of people of different cultures and backgrounds. So when you go back to the country of origin, it's always surprising how it changes, and often for the better. I think that's what's happened with our company. We had a great heritage, a great history, a tremendous organization. But what we have done in the past year is we have taken that and turbocharged it. We have rebranded. We are now playing in a much larger market. The CX market, just the software market, is $16 billion and growing at 23%, which are staggering numbers if you think about it, right? We've got a tremendous technology innovation
Mhm.
strategy, which is backed by results.
Mhm.
Every 90 days, we have a big release of technology, which is amazing. We
Mhm.
have a CEO who was ranked number 21 in the world amongst all software SaaS CEOs.
Wow.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Our company was ranked in the top 10 by Gartner for innovation and execution.
Hmm.
And if you look at one of the new social media platforms called Comparably,
Hmm.
which compares companies, we were ranked number one by people for culture. So those are the facts that give an indication that this company is very much on the right track. And
Hmm.
I think that's visible to
Hmm.
people who have rejoined our company. Some of them have rejoined after 10 years. That's a big
Hmm.
gap. And some after a couple of years. But this company is certainly on a tear. We're very proud of what we have achieved, but we're also very humble
Yeah.
because we know there's a lot more to do.
Hmm.
And I think humility and empathy are very important when you're building tools and technologies to listen to customers and to listen with empathy and to listen without prejudice, right? To not put your own lens on what you're listening, to listen to what needs to be listened to. And so I think we also drink our own champagne. So we use our own technology to help us manage our own business. We listen to all customer signals. We listen to employee signals through the voice of employee. I think that's a big category that has taken off now because of the
Yeah.
pandemic. Companies are very interested in understanding how their employees are doing
Yeah.
because some of them haven't seen their employees in 9 months, right? Or
Yeah.
haven't seen them outside of Zoom. They've only seen them remotely.
Yeah.
So for all those reasons, I think Alida is in a great spot, and we're really looking forward to the journey ahead.
That's wonderful. Thank you for share. Thank you for sharing that. Some great examples of the kind of leadership we need right now, and the talk of humility and empathy and authenticity is exactly what we need to be talking about now. I will likely have many listeners who haven't got enough, but of course we have a time limit. Where can they go to hear more of your thoughts on this and other subjects?
They can go to alida.com. It's ALIDA.com. That's our corporate website. And it has a lot of great content. It has videos, it has brochures, it's got some thought leadership. And if they want to reach out to me directly, they can send me an email. It's RIAZ or Z. So RIAZ at alida.com.
Excellent. Yes, thank you for your time. I know we probably bumping up against your schedule. You're very busy. Uh, Great to be connected again, and I know we're going to have many conversations on this very important topic that is close to my heart and close to yours. And I look forward to that next conversation. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Shakil. It was a real pleasure being with you, and thank you for a lovely conversation.
So that was a pretty intensive, intellectually stimulating conversation. But here are my key takeaways. First, from years of helping organizations craft customer experience transformations, Riaz identified three critical enablers for organizations. The first is having the availability and being reliant on facts and figures. That is real information about customer experience, current state, comparison to customers, and where you want to get to. The second is to make sure there's a cross-functional orchestration throughout the organization, focus on creating incredible customer experiences. And that's more than just words, it's about taking action. And third, he talked about having leadership. Now, this is not about position in the hierarchy, but it's about behavior, which he calls CX leadership. Putting the needs of the customer ahead of the needs of any one department. He went on to talk about some shifts in the world that are leading to a customer experience revolution. And he named three of these. The first is the evolution of the subscription business model, where a company's growth and survival comes from the ability to delight customers from month to month, because customers make decisions on whether they're going to continue their services on a monthly basis. That has increased the power of the buyer. He also talked about a second trend, which is the access to inexpensive and ubiquitous mobile technology, which further increases the power of the consumer and provides them access wherever they are in the world to the digital economy and the ability to buy anytime, anywhere. And the third trend is social media, making it very easy for individuals, any individual, to report on great and terrible customer experiences And that message can reach millions and have a significant consequence for companies. So as these three trends are driving a revolution in customer experience, and also supported by technology, it is enabling companies in a way they never have before to have access to the ability to make changes and respond to customer changes. See, the access to technology today both enables and requires companies to gather customer signals and gather those signals from customers where they are and in the way they want to give it in an engaging way. It also allows them to be accountable and sharing those insights back with customers. It also enables and requires the ability for organizations to take action at both the micro level for individual customer recovery and delight, as well as gather data and aggregate that data at the macro level to gather insights to redesign products and services and features to create value for the masses. Both of these require CX leadership to move from insight to action. We had a great conversation about the future, particularly given what's happened with the pandemic. He said, companies that pay attention to the way customers' lives are changing now and modify their services so that when the demand comes back, those services are relevant to the way those lives have changed. Those companies that do that will win. Now, we didn't spend time on this topic, but I think it's important to mention, which is how that same set of tools, technology, capabilities to gather insight and take action at the customer level can also be used by companies to capture signals about employee experience and employee engagement and take action on those things as well. And to me, that really is the most powerful thing here. To first be able to gather insights from customers about how they want to be served and make changes accordingly, and be able to gather insights from employees about how they want to be served. When you put those two things together, when you put together the ability to change customers' experiences and change employee experiences, that's when you take empathy to a whole new level. And empathy offered in that way at the mass scale can lead to a better world for us all. I hope you enjoyed that conversation. Have a great day. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, or share it. I want to say thank you to one of my favorite bands, Late Night Conversations, for sharing their song Chaos with me and letting me use it in this episode. You can learn more about them on Instagram at LNC Connected. And here's more of their song Chaos to take you out.
Far behind my eyes, mediation, suffocation, it'll break me. Information in disguise. But when your eyes finally found mine, you were there, but I'm defined by the chaos in my mind. I believe what I perceive is a weave tearing at the seams, and I wonder what's behind. And my ears are bleeding, and the reason isn't the logic of the season, taking the pleasing from my soul and leaving me to die. And I feel the lacing, LNC like racing, unstationary animation taking me from the purpose of my life.